Hey artists, we're going to paint our Snow Place Like Home, Let It Snow, Winter Tier Tray Kit. And I'm going to start with a few of the things that I feel like are sort of new. And so the first is this You Melt My Heart sign that the little snowman holds. And so my suggestion to make the letters pop is to, with your little black pot, you're going to put some paint onto your wedge, and you're going to want a wet wipe for this, or something where you can wipe off as much of the excess paint as possible. So I have one here that I've been using, and you can re-wet it if you need to, but basically what you want to do is really work paint down into where the lettering is etched. And the reason for that is when we etch into wood, it makes it more porous, so it really wants to soak up as much of that paint as it can, whereas the top part where we haven't etched is not quite as porous. So you want to make sure that you get a completely, like all the inside of your letters black, and then with your wet wipe go over the top and really, that one's had white paint on it, and really work out that black paint. Okay, what you want to be left with is just that black paint that seeps down into the lettering and the natural sort of brown background from the wood. So, I apologize, I got white paint over the top of it, so it has kind of lightened my lettering on that end. But you can keep rubbing this until you're happy with it. And if you really want to get the top layer of black paint off of there as quickly as you can, but if you let it soak in too long, you can also take a piece of sandpaper over the top. Sorry, you guys are not seeing what I'm doing here. You can take a piece of sandpaper over the top, and that'll take off some more of that black paint and leave your lettering with a good contrast. It looks like I have a little piece of sandpaper over here. I could show you what that looks like. And this just happens to be a piece I have lying here, and it is 220 grit, but honestly, just about anything would work. All right, clean out the sanding dust. And that's what we're left with. So obviously, the faster you get that black paint off the top, the more contrast you're going to get. So that's sort of a new technique for this month. And then the other thing is that this month there's a tiny bit of freehand involved with their Snow Place Like Home piece. So you received a little gift set with this month's box that had some paintbrushes and a little tray. So we're going to use the tray to hold our paint, and we're going to mix white and blue going forward, so just know that. But what I was going to say is in these paintbrushes, you have a few options for ones that are super fine tipped. So the teeny tiniest one is this one, and this one here, and it's a good option. It's on the very end, but any of these that come to a super fine point, if you have one that comes to a finer point even than that one on the end, feel free to use that. And don't be intimidated, it's not as difficult as it sounds. But the first thing that you want to do is just paint that side white. Give that white paint a chance to dry before you do your lettering. So I've just snipped the very corner of my paint here, and I'm going to just pour some of my white paint into this first little tray. And with one of your wedges, I'm going to use the same one I used for my black. Go ahead and paint There's No Snow Place Like Home. I'm going to do this side white so that I get a good contrast with the thin lettering. So I'm kind of just laying down one coat first using the swiping motion. I do talk a lot about the dab, 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 and we're going to do that in just a second. I just want to get one coat down to get some coverage, and now I'm going to come back in with my dabbing to get that nice opaque, smooth, no streaks, no globs finish. Done. And then there is a bunch of white on here, so I am going to stop talking and time lapse the rest of this white. All of your snowflakes are white, your snowman's white, your pile of snow is white, and then all of these pieces are also white. Your garland, your snowflakes, so much white. So here we go. Okay, moving on to our navy pieces. I have them all sectioned out or put in one spot so that I don't paint anything the wrong color by accident or forget something while I'm working with that particular color. So for navy, we've got these pieces here, the snow place, the scarf, snow, the roof, let it snow, and then this half of the houses. So go ahead and load your sponge with paint. I'm just going to work paint into it so it travels well on your pieces. You want to work paint in and then make sure all the excess is off so that when you go to sponge onto your piece, you don't get globs of paint. So when I'm doing this, I'm just going to make a nice neat line with the edge of my sponge right along that edge there. And then I can start with my dabbing. Okay, and for the rest of the pieces, same thing. Remember on your letters not to swipe. You want to use strictly dabbing motions to keep those nice, crisp, clean lines. So I've got paint loaded into my sponge. I really don't need to dab again until it starts running out, and then I'll work it more in and make sure I don't have too much before I move on to my piece. So here we go. Let's do the teeny tiny bit of orange on the nose. So this is way more orange than you will need, but I'm just going to dip one little corner of my wedge in here and dab along the carrot noses. I don't know if you'll notice, but I am painting left-handed because I think it gives you a better view of what I'm doing. So that's fun. Okay, that's done, and then let's go ahead and do our arms, because then we're going to move to mixing some colors together and doing some ombres and things like that. So same thing, open the little bit of brown that you received. I'm just going to use the other end of this and make sure I have enough that if a little orange soaks through, it'll still be primarily brown. So there we go. That should do. I'm just going to dab off a little bit. Pull those arms real quick. Close this up so I don't end up with brown paint somewhere I don't want it. Okay, so same thing as on the house, just line up the tip of your sponge to the tip where you want the brown paint to go. And then start with the pieces that we want to have more of this turquoisey blue, because the rest of the blues are going to be a mixture of white and blues together. And really that's going to be up to you how you want to mix those colors. But I'll show you, we'll do it together and you can see how I do it and go from there. Okay, so I snipped a tiny corner. I'm just going to get a little bit of this out because we really don't need a ton. All right, and so the two places that I want just this blue are going to be in the ombre down here at the bottom of this and the bottom of this, and then I'm going to use it to accent some of the edges on like our snowflakes and the little snow pile here. So I'm going to use the wedge that has white in it already. Okay, and so for ombre, what we talked about in the past is you're going to start at the bottom with just a full on the color that you want that portion to be, and you work your way up. Your paint is going to kind of start to dry up as you work your way up, so you don't need a whole heck of a lot in your sponge. Okay, so I'm going to stop there on that one. And for this one, a lot of this down here at the bottom is covered by the snowman. So that's a good place to start to get kind of a feel for how your paint is going to lay, because where that snowman is going to be covering up. And then same thing, work your way up. And with these scored lines, really you just want to avoid getting gloppy paint in them. They're going to show up unless you put really thick paint down on this piece. They're not going to go into those lines and they'll remain dark. Okay, so I'm going to stop there on this one. And then in just a few places here and there on these guys. Okay, be careful with this. This is super sticky if you peel it off, but I just want to dab along the edge of this to make it stand out against the snowman. And you don't have to do it all the way anywhere. Just really whatever you think. I accidentally squirted some black paint there. I will touch that up. Okay. And then, actually, I realized I do not have the little frame that goes on this guy. Don't have that. I'm not going to stop the video to go get it. It's just white. Whole thing is white, so you would have done that during that time lapse. And then these are blue, so I'm going to add some detail to those later on. But for the garland, I'm going to go ahead and just add some of that same accenting. So when you're doing this, depending on how you want your accenting to be applied, just make sure you know where your holes are so that you don't, if you want all of your accenting on, you know, the same side, you want to orient it to those holes. Working with white so much, I will say if you keep that baby wipe or a dampened rag handy, just wipe off the paint from your fingers every so often so that you don't do like I do and transfer fingerprints repeatedly onto your white pieces. Add just some blue to these, and I'll come back when we have a lighter blue and add some more blue to them. Okay, so to do your lighter blues, you're going to want to use your tray and just experiment with a little bit of paint. We have all of the solid colors that we need at this point, so you may want to save a little bit of white, and that's it. To do the white, you're going to want to use to make a gray if you want to accent these pieces. And then for if you want to do some accents on the scarf, probably white you'll want to do with that, but you could use white and blue. And then lastly, anything that you want to add just kind of like a snowy effect to, like the rooftops and that sort of thing. So keep a little bit of white to the side, but you have all of these little compartments here in this tray where you can mix your different colors together and just see what blue you like that you'd like to incorporate on your piece. They're gonna, because you've used these colors individually, mixing them together is gonna make a color palette that all blends and goes well with each other. So I'm just going to, just so if you feel like you're afraid to waste paint or something like that, I'm going to mix a few of these up just so you can see what some of these options are. So the Caribbean blue with navy is going to give you this sort of, I would say, like a cornflower blue. I really like that. And then if we wanted to add a little bit of white to this for to make it a baby blue. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Could maybe add a little bit more white. Just remember that darker colors are going to darken more than lighter colors are going to lighten. So you need more white to lighten a color than you need dark color to darken it. So I'm just going to scrape a little bit more off of here, work that in. I'm going to go ahead and do, since I have this navy here, you can do navy or black for this part. I'm going to do navy because that's the color of the rest of the letters. And I'm going to go ahead and show you the lettering on this guy. So, okay, so again, you want to use the brush in your kit that it has the finest tip. Load your paintbrush, that means get a good amount of paint into the bristles and then work out as much of it as you can, because you don't want too much paint. Okay, and then make sure you've groomed your bristles so that they're all they're not wonky or anything, and then start with very light pressure and just work in straight lines. Don't try to do any curves, or like don't try to do it like you're writing. Try to work only in straight lines, and then where they meet you can do sort of a very light dabbing motion to fill that part in, but it's really difficult to do any kind of a curve. So yeah, I just suggest using that dabbing motion on any areas that you don't get completely filled in how you want it. So like right here on the bottom of this eye, I don't want to do a whole nother stroke because I like how that top looks. So I'm just going to use a few little dabs to fill in that very bottom of the eye. Okay, and then same thing goes for your E's. Don't try to do like a do. Just do your straight lines. Okay. And if anything gets crazy, again, you're using really light pressure on here and just the slightest amount of paint in your paintbrush. If anything messes up, don't worry. You can try to remove some of it with a wet wipe if you feel comfortable doing that. If not, just try to kind of use your fingernail, and then once it dries, you can come back in with white and do a little minor repair. I wouldn't suggest trying to paint a whole lot, just paint on top of it to like touch up a tiny bit, or you're going to end up with a sort of an uneven white finish. So if you notice up here on the M, I did, where it curves, I did sort of dabbing as opposed to a swiping. And I'm going to do the same thing on the tops of these O's. And then the two sides of the O's are really just two straight lines. So okay, going back to my old wedge that I used. Well, let me take that back. I'm going to use the wedge I used with my navy, and I'm going to work this new lighter color into wedge, and the reason that I'm doing it with this one is because as we work this into our ombres, I'm going to want to come back with this lighter color and work that in. So again, you want to start up at the tops, just short little motions here. That is a little bit too much green there. Don't want to fill in my etched lines, so I'm going to actually do it on this one to work out more of that paint before I move to that piece. Okay, so we're going to go just swipe back and forth until we meet down here with this blue. You want it to be darkest at the top, and then when you get here, just take your wedge that may still have some of this blue in it. If it doesn't, let's just get a tiny bit more here and really work it in, because we don't want a heavy line, and start at the bottom to work out any real excess, and then work up into that new blue. And back and forth, work that new blue down into this, and work the lighter blue up into that. Just for fun, add a tiny bit of just this darkest blue up here at the top. And work it down. Ombres are one of my favorite things to do, so I could spend a really long time. Okay, let that dry and see what we think. And then moving back to this piece. Okay, so I just added plain white into where I mixed that lighter blue color, and I'm going to work it into my wedge with that older blue and get that real pale blue color. And on this piece here with all these snowflake pieces, it's delicate, so you definitely don't want to use too much paint, because it'll fill in those tiny little crevices really easily. So make sure you get as much excess off as you can before you move on to your piece. Okay, and then let's do his little snowman hat this color also. So we've got the ball and the liner that will cover up the rest of that. Give it just a second to dry. I'm gonna do with this really lighter blue. That's not the right wedge. Alright, I'm just gonna do just a little bit of accenting on the back of these skates. Alright, I wasn't a huge fan of how far in that blue came, so I've left a little bit just for some shadowing, but taken off the rest. Alright, so what we have left to do is start piecing together our pieces and adding just any accents that we'd like. So I worked a little bit of water into that white paint. And I'm going to go ahead and assemble And before I do the scarf, so that I get a better idea of how the lines would run where his scarf ties. Okay, so this first piece of your scarf is just going to run right here along his neck. Okay, we've got the little knot, and you just want to find the right angle. It should line up with this edge over here and along the top. Okay, and then using that same fine brush, you could do polka dots or really anything on here. I'm just going to kind of keep it simple and do some wavy lines here and there, varying the thickness. This guy. Oh, my white paint didn't quite go high enough, so I'm just going to try to fill that in. This is the little curved nose. There's one that's a little bit more pointy on the tip, so, and it goes with the other snowman. So let's go ahead and put this guy together. So you have kind of a guideline on this one from the snowflakes. Right. His nose. Depending on what colors you chose for the background on that piece, you may or may not need to fill in some black. If you do, my suggestion on the mouth, if you do, my suggestion would be to do it on the tip of a real thin paintbrush and just dab a little bit in there so that you don't get any black on the outside of his mouth. So that guy's done. I'm going to all right, for this one with the white, I have a kind of a glob on the tip. I'm just going to dab down onto these little snowballs. Don't want to mess up my ombre by trying to fix that, so I'm just gonna blend that into a larger snowball. It's fine. Snowflakes with some different colors in them, so let's just kind of do a marbled look on these guys, and they'll go on top of the frame for this piece. Okay. Okay. Last but not least, you want to use your string for three things: your garland, your You Melt My Heart, and your skates. So go ahead and string let's go through this way. So we went through the T side on the back and then up through the U side, down that way, up the other way. And then for this side, just gonna lay this guy flat. So you get an idea of about where you want your sign to be. And so I can move this. Move it this way. Okay, and then just tie. Alright, so we want to move this loop up here. And then to do your knot, go ahead and go back down to the main. Okay, and then use your paintbrush to help you tighten that. Okay, so let's see how we're laying here. Loop that guy around his fingers, and then just kind of move your sign to the center. And certainly you can, like if you wanted to try to make it a little bit shorter, wrap it around his finger again, and then reposition it. He's so cute. Okay. Alright. That's done. Garland is straightforward. Just loop. When you do your garland, you take, you want your string to be in the back, so string it from the front and then up that way. Okay, and I would say just from the other end that you do your garland, or go ahead and do the laces first. Just loop it through one, and then you have plenty of string, so you're not gonna, it's not gonna be too short. All right, go ahead and loop it through both of those from the back, pull it forward, and then just tie a normal bow. Okay, and those are pretty long, so we can trim those off. I'm going to do a double knot just to make it look a little bit heftier. If you wanted to tie these into, after you do your double knot, if you wanted to tie these, your ends into another set of loops, you can. It'll just make it look a little bit more full. The other thing I was going to say, on the blades of these, if you mix a tiny bit, I mean a tiny bit of black, because remember, darker, you need more light to lighten up the color. So I literally just put the tiniest dab on the end of this, and if I mix it into this white, let's see how dark it gets. Okay, so it's not quite the gray I'm looking for. Let's do just a smidge more. Okay, I don't know how well this is showing up on camera, but this is a very faint gray that you can come in and just do the bottoms of these. And you know, now that I'm saying that, I think I've been doing all of this gray, but I'm thinking that part, we're in Houston, we don't do a lot of ice skating around here, but I think this part right here is actually brown, which you have, so you can also just accent this with a little bit of black to make this part stand out. That would be okay. So I add a little bit more black, and this is a significantly darker gray. All right, everybody, happy painting.